Living in the Past is a Turtle, Mysteries of Azeroth, and Everlook Broadcasting production. This is Living in the Past, your Everlook Broadcasting Company weekly show about all things Turtle Mysteries of Azeroth. Today is Friday, November 17th, 2023, and I'm Dan, your host for the next hour. Happy Friday, sports fans. Another week is in the books, and we're here once again for Living in the Past. While no gnomes or elves were available to hold Zappo hostage while I take over the airwaves once again, I was able to herd about 17 rabid turkeys into the hallways of Everlook Broadcasting to make sure he had to keep the door to the office he's trapped in locked and barred, lest he become some kind of pilgrim's bounty feast himself. Also, finding 17 different rabid turkeys was a bit of a challenge, and I'm kind of proud of myself for it. For those that don't know, Pilgrim's Bounty here in Azeroth is based on Thanksgiving here in the United States. This weekend, I'll be having some folks over for our yearly Friendsgiving-miss before going out and celebrating with family next week and later on next month. One thing I picked up for this year is a local cider here in Massachusetts, and while I originally hoped it'd last through the end of December, it may make it to the end of November. Maybe. We'll see about that. I hope everyone gets to spend time with friends and family as we enter the holiday season. Whether it's blood relatives or found family, those close to you are what matter most this time of year. Another note on this time of year, because of events, family, and obligations, if you're a raider here on Turtle, your schedule might feel overfilled or thrown upside down. I'd encourage everyone to not stress this. Take the time off that they need to, and remind organizers and raid leads to have patience and understanding if the availability of raiders is a bit rough through the end of the year. Many times, this is one of the only times people can see family or friends, through much of the year even, and January is right around the corner. So this is a great time to start thinking about your schedule starting in 2024 and how you want to approach raiding. This is the best time to get that stuff on the books. Getting back to Pilgrim's Bounty, though, coming up here over the next week or so, we have something special you're going to hear on Everlook Broadcasting starting today. We're going to have regular Pilgrim's Bounty themed segments and advertisements that the team of writers, VOs, and editors have put together for your enjoyment. Look forward to hearing them in regular rotation as soon as this broadcast ends. I'm sure some of you are wondering if we're going to be hearing or doing regular themed holiday segments like we did for Hollow's End and are currently going to be doing for Pilgrim's Bounty, and the answer to that is an enthusiastic yes. I can't wait to see everyone's reactions to the creative and wild creations the Everlook team has put together for you all. In a moment here, we'll talk a little lore on a side project I've been working on, something fun I've let my brain sink into for the last week or so, and afterwards for our main segment, we're going to be featuring a conversation I had with the maker of RaidRes, a site that is built from the ground up for Turtle WoW that pulls directly from information from Turtle, and it supports soft res and hard res loot systems for raiders right here. To wrap up the show today, on our last segment, an update on my Fury Warrior as I look to start BWL with my guild, as well as some thoughts on blacksmithing here on Turtle before we close up shop. Let's get right into the lore. And the lore I've had on my mind over the last week or so has been the mechanics behind arcane magics in the Warcraft universe. When I say mechanics, I don't mean the cast time of Firebolt, or Frostbolt rather, or the best time to pop combustion. I'm talking about how they function as a part of the universe at large. Where their energy comes from, how spells are constructed, what makes them stronger, weaker, or non-functional even. Before sinking into this in any detail, and unfortunately there's less detail on this from the RTS games than I like by a long shot, let's define what arcane magic actually is. There's fel magic, the light and shadow, arcane, nature, and elemental magics in the greater Warcraft universe. Arcane magics include a lot of different elements themselves, but are separate entirely from elemental magic. We have some schools that we know of that are very much set in stone, such as frost, fire, chronomancy, and hydromancy. There are also schools that are a little fuzzy around the edges, like the concept of an arcane school that combines a touch of chronomancy, raw arcane manipulation, and conjuration. If we look back to the original Warcraft, the first arcane magic users were conjurers of Stormwind, who could create fire and rain it from the sky, summon and control water constructs, and even teleport in deadly creatures of the forest. At the time, these weren't bundled into any kind of set of spells or schools, but the name Conjurer very much indicates the first inkling of doctrines for arcane spellcasters. On top of that, their focus on summoning very much leans into the idea that conjurers are focused on just that, conjuration. Warcraft 2 gives us Dalaran and their mages, more strict and experienced magic users with a wider array of spells at their disposal. We get some interesting new magic twists from them, including the origins of the spells Blizzard, Polymorph, Slow, and Invisibility. We don't see invisibility in-game on Turtle, as it's not included, I believe, until Wrath, but you get the idea. Once again, mages don't fall into any specific category of spellcasters, but instead pull specific spells that represent different doctrines into their short abilities list. Polymorph is a staple of any conjuration spellcaster. Blizzard is something we see consistently in Warcraft 3 as well as World of Warcraft as a part of the Frost discipline. Slow is solid chronomancy, and Invisibility is a bit of a head-scratcher, but could easily fall into raw arcane manipulation, conjuration, or chronomancy. Stepping up to Warcraft 3, with Archmage heroes and Sorceress spellcasters, the only thing we see that's truly new is Brilliance Aura, and the ability to passively affect a lot of allies in range of the caster with an ability like this. There are a lot of new auras in Warcraft 3 in particular, and I'm not going to go through them, but this is our best example. We do see a lot of callbacks and abilities from previous games from other spellcasters, including the return of water constructs from the original Warcraft in the form of water elemental summoning. There's not much new here, unfortunately, though, but the repetition does help staple down what should be considered consistent with the universe at large. One thing we do see is more detail on runes and circles of power by spellcasters, and more background on how arcane spells are constructed. Let's take a specific example of this, as we do need to keep moving, but I want to be specific with this thought. In the cinematic at the end of the Scourge campaign of Warcraft 3, we see the demon Archimonde writing a giant rune in the ground before using its magic to destroy Dalaran. If these were demonic magics, we see fel energy everywhere. However, Archimonde comments on how Dalaran should get a taste of their own medicine for stealing the power they wield. This doesn't make a ton of sense because fel and arcane have different sources, but I fully believe Archimonde believes all magic should be theirs, and thus this does make sense. In addition, it's well documented that Dalaran is located at a nexus of ley lines on Azeroth. It would make sense that instead of trying to pull fel magics from the Twisting Nether, Archimonde would use what's available then and there, which is prodigious arcane magics, and thus we get to see Dalaran obliterated in this epic cinematic. This sounds like making a lot out of nothing. I understand that. But when you take arcane magics and certain flavor text and conversations in World of Warcraft and add it into this, we see a clear basis that arcane magics are consistent and mathematically based, versus the chaotic nature of Fel, or the difficult to control nature magics, or the frugal and protective elemental magics. Again, elemental and arcane elements are completely separate sources of magic, so please keep that in mind here. Let's look at another example of this in World of Warcraft specifically. Throughout Stormwind, there's these 3 mages walking and talking around. They do a big patrol through the trade and mage districts. As they walk, they're talking technical jargon and magical terms that are mostly references or buzzwords. And people generally don't notice it or write it off as just humor or flavor. Well, I'm not going to break down what they're saying, as I'm not sure what they're saying for much of it. How they're saying it is a huge piece of insight as to how arcane magic functions in the Warcraft universe. They're speaking specific details, formulas, and mathematical, or if you want to be cheeky about it, mathemagical, mechanics, with a focus on precision and accuracy. This is akin to conversations that physicists have when they're discussing the nature of an experiment, trying to get the details right, or bakers arguing over a few teaspoons of flour or salt in a recipe. And if you ever have a conversation with a baker about this, they will hold to their dying breath that baking is math. Cooking you can freestyle and have creativity with, but baking, you have to do the math on it. It is vital. It's just I baked for a while, so funny point. It may be foreign math to many of us, but these conversations that these three mages have, along with what we discussed previously, are just complicated mathematical equations in magical form. To close this discussion out, while I mentioned a few schools or disciplines of arcane magics, let's just really quick add a little flavor to this and mention a list of them in full. There's fire, frost, arcane manipulation, hydromancy, chronomancy, conjuration, transmutation, and teleportation. There's a little wiggle room between conjuration and transmutation, but I do believe they should be separate schools, as we see specific examples of each doing their own thing. But those are the current known schools or disciplines of magic as of World of Warcraft's vanilla launch. Getting into our first break here, we've got a pair of songs from the early days of musical parodies. The first, the winner of a contest from back in 2006, is the song Billy McClure, a cover of Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. The second song of the break is a cover of Shut Up and Drive, originally by Rihanna, called Shut Up and Grind, performed by Ember Assault. My conversation with the creator of the new Raid Res system coming up right after this break. The musical tracks for this episode have been removed due to YouTube copyright. To listen to the full episodes with music, tune in to Everlook Broadcasting every Friday with the in-game radio widget. Welcome back to Living in the Past for our main segment. I'm Dan, and I'm happy to have you back with us. For a while now, as raiders on Turtle WoW, we've had to deal with the fact that SoftRes doesn't allow for multi-faction raids or have any of the custom loot that we have on Turtle. Solutions for this have ranged from Discord threads to PMs and taking individual notes for individual raiders. Let me tell you what's really annoying to do. Literally all of that. Very frustrating. Now though, a new website is changing that called RaidRes, which you can find at raidres, RAIDRES, .fly, FLY, .dev, DEV. You can set up your soft res or hard res for whatever raids you'd like that are available on Turtle, with the full database of items available on Turtle, including custom items and unique additions, without having to worry about what faction you feel like setting for the raid that day. The maker of Raid Res, Itami Druids, was kind enough to answer some written questions I had for them earlier this week. Let's take some time to go through them and see what they had to share with the wider Turtle community. As a reminder, they were able to just answer the questions via text, so I'm going to be talking about their answers here versus actually having a full interview with them. I started out by asking what spurred Itami Druids on to take the time to build a whole website like this just for Turtle, and his answer was twofold. They started out by mentioning that they had been looking for a side project to try out for some new technologies that they were interested in exploring, but followed up with a conundrum their guild faced. They mentioned that when their guild faced the task of manually recording reservations for the Emerald Sanctum release, it sparked the idea to develop a reservation system similar to SoftRes. The product that we see today on RaidRes is a direct result of that inspiration, similar enough to SoftRes to be recognizable and easy to adopt, but clearly built from the ground up as its own new product for us here at Turtle. When it comes to contributions to the project, this has been something Itami Druids has been working on solo off and on for about a month or so, and mainly in their off time on evenings and weekends. They mentioned specifically using the time spent in AV queues to their advantage with this. Also, the community has been helping test the system over the last few weeks, with help coming from Shatterlock, I apologize if I mispronounced that, with itemization, as well as feedback from a pair of my stellar teammates here at Pugonomics, Toll and Deathshots. Also mentioned in Itami Druid's response was Sylvie, the individual maintaining the Turtle Atlas Loot add-on, which data was originally pulled from for RaidRes when the website was initially spun up. In asking how the wider Turtle community has been responding to so far with RaidRes, Itami Druids was emphatic that the response has been incredible, and praised the valuable suggestions and feedback that everyone has been getting to them on a regular basis. Specifics like being able to lock in hard reses, setting class specifications, and a few other suggestions have been invaluable in the recent few weeks. As a follow-up to that, I wanted to ask how people could continue to support RaidRes as well as provide ongoing feedback. While there is a very useful feedback button on the RaidRes website that anyone can use to provide suggestions or information, Itami Druids is also totally okay with folks talking to them in-game whenever people see them online. While there is no Patreon or other method to help financially support RaidRes, the developer is okay with small, reasonable in-game gifts if anyone wants to send anything their way. Again, the in-game name for them is Itami Druids. Itame Druids. I'd like to thank them for taking the time to answer some of my questions. As mentioned previously, this is a fun side project for them, but one we sorely need here on Turtle. Having a website with an active developer that's happy to contribute their time and efforts to those who want to raid regularly like this, to provide us this kind of resource, is incredibly kind of them. Once again, please head over to raidres.fly.dev. That's raidres, RAIDRES, .fly, FLY, .dev, dev, to use this new tool for raiding here on Turtle, as well as to provide feedback. On a personal note on this as well, for those that don't know, I do the Loot Master duties for Pugonomics, and having to adapt to trying to use something like SoftRes, the website itself, not the general system, but the actual website, while also making sure everybody is accounted for, having to deal with, okay, well, the raid is set for Horde or the raid is set for Alliance, and then Paladins or Shamans having to try and add the gear that they want being locked out because either it's not available at all on soft res or it's locked to a different class when it shouldn't be, it's been really frustrating. And not to complain excessively, but Raid Res, even though we've only really just started using it as of this week for our regular raids, on Sunday I'm doing a combined ZG on Courage 20, and I'm using it for both. It's already been a real breath of fresh air and has taken a lot of stress off of me as someone who needs to make sure loot is distributed fairly and effectively. For those that have actually run with me, I take my job a little too seriously at times. So the fact that this tool is being developed, not just by someone who I guess you would say is local, that accessibility to be able to talk to the dev and work with them and get things implemented that are useful, and really as a part of the community, it's so satisfying. It's so satisfying to be able to work with that person, provide them feedback, get them the information they're looking for, and in turn get the tools that I need to actually function on a regular basis, and much better than what I would do with soft res. It's really nice. So again, thank you so much to Enemy Druids for their hard work here and for being receptive to feedback and updates. It's really nice to have that, and I hope everyone checks out Raid Res if you are a raider here on Turtle. Please take the time, even if you're just looking at the website, see what features are going on, and it's going to help you function that much better here as a part of the Turtle raiding community. And with that being said, for our second break of the show tonight, another pair of parodies and covers, as well as a piece from Thoriana and Jambojin, the band that does our closing music here on Living in the Past. The first, a cover of Moves Like Jagger from Maroon 5, and it goes out to all those fantastic hooved up cows out there. It's Moo Like Torin. I am so sorry to all the mods in World Chat for this one, because the moos are going to be off the chart. The second cover of this break is also by Ember Assault and others, called Rolling Out the Deeps, and is a parody of Rolling in the Deep by Adele. Our final song of the break, as mentioned just a few moments ago, is Run to the Tank by Thoriana and Jambojin, a solid reminder that everyone should respect your tanks and let them do their jobs. Closing thoughts coming up right after this here on Living in the Past. The musical tracks for this episode have been removed due to YouTube copyright. To listen to the full episodes with music, tune in to Everlook Broadcasting every Friday with the in-game radio widget. I don't think Thoriana and Jambojin ever made a bad song. It's unfortunate that their catalog of music ended up being so small. I would have enjoyed a much larger album from them before they ended their work. Welcome back to the final segment here of Living in the Past. For our closing thoughts here today, I wanted to take a few moments and give an update on the Fury Warrior I've been working on. With hit no longer an issue as of last weekend, I've been laser focused on finding appropriate goblin-y weapons. I was extremely lucky to pick up a sand-polished hammer last weekend, and just a few days ago, the dagger off a car filled my offhand slot. Combined, this weapon combo has me solidly in the black up through AQ40, where there are multiple weapon upgrades available. Similarly with gear, Karazhan has been a massive help for filling some gaps. The leather hood and legs out of there have been a great increase in overall raid performance. I'm hoping I can pick up the hit back piece as well as the plate helmet at some point, But if I can't get them, there's plenty of other options. The AQ20 cloak example for warriors is great for Fury. Hit, strength, agility, everything a warrior wants. One thing I noticed while running my stat prios last night was with raid buffs, I'm starting to hit the crit cap. Now, that is with a lot of raid buffs. You know, everything from kings to leader of the pack. So keep in mind this is with a lot. But it means that I need to be switching in more hit to push that crit cap up as my gear continues to develop. Overall, it's been incredibly satisfying to get back to being a Fury Warrior. While I'm not abandoning my Shadow Priest entirely, I might keep switching to healing every so often on her, I am making this a bit of a main switch in progress. We'll see what Blackwing Lair next week has on offer for me, and if I can perform well enough to justify bringing him there at this point. I feel like the gear on the Goblin overall is BWL ready. Fire resist is just above 200, so I'm really not worried about Fire Maw. Overall, I think I can perform well enough to come there and not be a burden on the group. In addition, a few thoughts on blacksmithing and the state of some professions on Turtle. And overall, let me just be clear, I think professions are very good on Turtle overall, but I do think there is a slight gap in them. While alchemy, engineering, and enchanting all maintain legitimate usefulness and needs even throughout the raid scaling, which essentially is my way of saying they're useful through the end of Tier 3, things such as leatherworking, blacksmithing, and tailoring really struggle to be relevant in the later tiers. One thing that our raid lead at Pugonomics regularly mentions is, if you're raiding, you should have engineering. I troll him on the rare occasion by bringing Easy Throw Dynamite 2, not the original Easy Throw Dynamite, Easy Throw Dynamite 2 to raids, but he makes an absolutely true point. Raiding benefits most from engineering as far as professions go. You hear most raiders actually comment on this pretty regularly and expect you to have engineering if you're hitting Nax. I would love to see that changed. Things like Dreamsteel and Karazhan blacksmithing patterns are a great start, but they cease being useful when you start looking at AQ40 or Nax gear. Belt buckles are an okay addition. They've been helpful, but some are so excessively cost prohibitive that most people are simply going to ignore them or go for the easier and cheaper to craft versions. This isn't necessarily like a bad thing because it means only the people that are truly dedicated to getting AQ40 or Nax done are going to be the ones who invest enough into belt buckles to get the higher tier ones and expend the materials. But it also it doesn't like provide enough of that reliability, that need rather, as raids go. As it stands, there can be like 2 or 3 people who make all the belt buckles on the server, and life is good. You're good. You're done. You don't need to worry about it anymore. How can this issue be solved then? And while I enjoy having this conversation with anyone, I'm honestly not sure how to answer this question. And while I do want to say, well, just add better late game patterns, forehead, to try and boil it down like that to that simple of a perspective is unfair to developers and quality assurance. This is a complex question of game balance, more than anything else, and something that's going to take time and effort to explore. And I do hope it gets explored. More professions in late game raiding deserve some love, I feel. Even if it's creating bind on pickup items or profession-specific gear, I would love to see more of that explored here in the near future. And certainly, as we heard from the interview that Rograg did, the developers here at Turtle are working, half a year ahead. They're working well far ahead of what they share publicly. So hopefully this is something that's already on their radar, but, we'll see. Anywho, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. Our nostalgia continues, even though today's broadcast is at an end. And I hope you enjoyed the show here today. A huge thank you to the Turtle developers, moderators, staff, and volunteers, without which the entire team's hard work and dedication, we wouldn't have this station or server group. An additional thank you to the audio engineers and creators here for the use of their soundtracks they've created, which we use for segment transitions and intro audio. If you'd like to find more about what I do, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedannation and my series, Ancient Lore, a recapture of the spirit of my original podcast, The Ancient of Lore. Until next Friday, let's keep living in the past.